almost reached the boiling point.
I would have drank gasoline if it would make me run faster.
An utterly despicable, malignant degenerate.
When it was over, all 9 Israelis were dead.
Basically like a steroid crack house.
You don't want to comment? Are you taking the fifth?
Maltsev is hooked on the play and got down by Clarke, and then hit with his stick accidentally on the play.
I had that anger, and I was allowed to use it over there.
They jam against the board, elbows so high.
I just saw nothing wrong with it at the time.
Shoving the referee, now they're swinging at each other.
All of a sudden, you find yourself able to do things that were not in you so far as you understood.
It doesn't bother me if people didn't like the way I played. You have to do what you have to do to be successful.
The Cold War for me was probably, the first recollection was probably the hydrogen bomb that the Soviets tested in 1955.
You know, you grew up in the 50s, you know, never wore a helmet or bikes. We swam in the rivers, you know, and it was an idyllic time.
When I was a kid in the Soviet Union, you would be told about the awful lack of justice and inequality in the United States against blacks, against communists, against people who were disadvantaged.
I can remember Nikita Khrushchev hammering the table at the UN, and then the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1961.
Good evening, my fellow citizens.
So dramatic for us.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
It seemed to come out of the blue, and it was Cuba. It was 90 miles away.
I don't know how you could have had a better place to grow up than what Flin Flon was. We had no idea politics or the Cold War. All I did was play hockey.
The first great evidence that came to North America about how good the Soviets were in hockey was the World Championships when they played the East York Lindhurst. And the Soviets beat them. Now, this Canadian team was an amateur team, but still it sent shockwaves through the whole Canadian hockey establishment.
We were outraged that the Soviets, these amateurs, could think of themselves as champions of the world when we knew we had the best players, and even then the frustration of not being able to use the NHL players.
At that time, Anatoly Tarasov, he got injured and became a coach, and he became the Soviet hockey guru.
Anatoly Tarasov was the legendary coach. He was there at the very beginning when hockey was brought into the Soviet Union.
He had these phenomenal conditioning requirements for the players, dry land training all summer. He made hockey a science.
He had a sense of history. He knew where the game came from. He admired, the great stars of Canadian hockey. But that didn't mean that there wasn't a different way of approaching it. His country was going in a different direction. Well, if his country was going to go in a different direction, why wouldn't Russian hockey go in a different direction?
For Tarasov, it was a game of the collective, just like the Soviet society was all about collectivity.
I talked to Mikhailov, Yakashev. They practiced 11 months a year, and they were away 6 nights a week. They hated their coaches, just hated them.
One of the coaches I talked to, he said, listen, we're trying to create the perfect hockey team here. Too bad if these players don't have personalities. Too bad if we turn them into ice robots.
I know it wasn't very good, all the players, but it gave the good results.
Anatoly Tarasov was almost like a combination of Sam Pollock and Scotty Bowman, all in one. They won World Championships from 63 to 71. He was the coach for every one of those wins.
I got so sick and tired of the Russians claiming victory every year. Everybody knew that their athletes were professionals. That's all they did.
I wouldn't say that the Soviets were tired of winning, but they really, really need another challenge.
Tarasov had done his job. There was nobody left but the NHL.
At that time, the Cold War was huge, and I knew nothing about politics. Only we hated Russia.
Now, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 156 157 158
Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev wanted hockey to be one of the boasting points for the Soviet system.
So when time came to decide whether or not to do this, Brezhnev had to be assured. There was a guy who was the chief propaganda, Suslov at the time, who was not for it. He had a lot of doubts about this. And the idea is, what if we get wiped out? What if the Canadians win all 8 games? That'd look terrible.
This was the first open international series. And it was our best against the best of the second best country in the world.
Yuri Gagarin was the first astronaut. He was incredibly popular in the Soviet Union, and he was a big hockey fan. And so he was very much involved with Alexander Yakovlev, who was the chief of propaganda, in trying to convince Brezhnev to have these games. Yakovlev was taking a chance. He promised that the Soviets would not be embarrassed.
No matter whether it was going to be a cakewalk or not, it was a big deal.
What I worried about was I going to do what was right to help the team? I couldn't think of, I got the burden of playing for this great, wonderful country because I wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Harry Sinden knew that they were better than we thought they were, and he was just trying to find a way of conveying how good they were.
Harry kept warning us, and he had a formidable job of trying to put this group together. There were some big egos, there were some out-of-condition guys. We had an arrogance about us that we're the best, we're gonna beat the Russians.
I don't believe they are as good as we are, and I just would like to have this issue settled. I think that they'll go home and they won't be too happy.
Every one of us on the team thought we would win 7, if not 8 games.
I can't recall any game that I've ever been at where you just feel the tension and it keeps building up. But the game is underway. Esposito going up over the line. A shot right in front of it.
I remember between our first goal and our second goal,
Back to Henderson.
feeling that this is going to be a struggle.
In the first 5 minutes of the first game, all the fun and games was over. This was war. I knew we were in deep, deep trouble.
About 10 minutes into the first period, you knew this was going to be a battle. You also knew that we weren't ready for the level of play that they were going to play at. It was scary.
The Soviets are putting on the pressure.
We had totally underestimated them. The physical conditioning was unnerving.
And then they scored, and then scored again. And what I do remember very well is the end of the first period.
And the siren goes.
And Harry Sinden coming into the dressing room and saying, "Well, you didn't think it was going to be easy, did you?"
When they won in Montreal 7-3, that was just like the explosion of atomic hockey bomb.
It was one of the worst feelings of my life.
The next morning, all the newspapers in Russia, they all have almost the same headline, which in Russian would be "Миф о непобедимости профессионалов развеян." The myth of unbeatable professional is destroyed.
After a loss like that, you really look inside yourself.
We were embarrassed, we were humiliated, we got our asses kicked. So you either fight back or you feel sorry for yourself, and we fought back.
Clarke, up over the line. Going in with a shot. Oh, and it's nearly deflected.
We needed that game so badly, and I looked at Peter Mahovlich.
It's a race down. Peter Mahovlich going in on goal. Right in.
The greatest goal I think ever scored in Maple Leaf Gardens Ice was that shorthanded goal.
Peter Mahovlich scored that goal that for me might have been the greatest goal I ever saw.
It's our game, and we're going to prove it tonight. I hope so.
And the anger was a great motivator in Toronto.
An entirely different story. Canada 4, and the Soviets 1.
You know, we played okay in Winnipeg.
And the game is over. And it ended in a 4-4 tie.
Our conditioning caught up to us. You can't play 3-4 games in a row on emotion.
Kutchak is being held on that last play by Mahovlich. Must have held him out there for about 10 seconds.
We weren't good. I wasn't good.
Backhand right foot, he scored!
Ken Dryden was a great goaltender, but I think the Russians had discombobulated him.
He scored! Pacheco let one go.
It was a game that mattered, and it just didn't go well. We were sour. The fans were sour. It was a pretty desperate end, to it all.
USSR have defeated Canada 5-3.
When the legs go, the head goes. We embarrassed ourselves, I think. Esposito saved us when he spoke to the Canadian public.
For the people across Canada, we tried. We did our best.
Phil looked like he was sweating the Mississippi River.
For the people that boo us, geez, all of us guys are really disheartened and we're disillusioned and we're disappointed in some of the people. We cannot believe the bad press we've got, the booing we've gotten in our own building.
There was something totally authentic about what he was saying, what he was feeling, how he looked.
Man, the sweat's pouring out. Like, I still get emotional watching Phil years and years later.
Every one of us guys, 35 guys that came out and played for Team Canada, we did it because we love our country and not for any other reason, no other reason. They can throw the money for the pension fund out the window, they can throw anything they want out the window. We came because we love Canada. And even though we play in the United States and we earn money in the United States, Canada is still our home, and that's the only reason we come. And I don't think it's fair that we should be booed.
It wasn't him saying, people, you should feel guilty. It was just Phil being Phil and expressing himself as he did, and people watching that and going, oh, geez, yeah, maybe we really are in this together.
We can see from the sweat just pouring off your face that you and all your players have given 100%, and we look forward to some great games from you and the rest of your gang when you get over to Moscow, and we can wish you the very best of luck.
John,
keep working hard.
We're going to get better. I know.
Attaboy. Thank you very much.
We were in a battle. We're going to Russia. He united Canada behind us.
We got over there, there's telegrams that came, and the 3,000 Canadians fans that came over. We would have never won it without those people.
So you had 3,000 people. This is 1972. This is the Cold War. Canadians aren't backpack Canadians yet. They're not traveling to Europe, let alone to the Soviet Union. So the Soviet part of it begins, and Tony plays really well, as we did for the first couple of periods. And then they came to life and scored in a bunch in the third and beat us.
We should have won. We gave up 3 or 4 goals in the third period, which a good team doesn't do.
We lose the game. It was a tremendous downer for us. And then we're skating off the ice, and those Canadians stand up and they start singing "O Canada" and gave us a standing ovation. It was unbelievable. I mean, it just lifted you up.
You had these North American hockey players who knew nothing about the world, but they had this big dark vision of the Soviet Union, which, my God, you know, Siberia and jails and gulags, crushing freedoms of people.
In that system, boy, you better do what they tell you to do or you're in deep trouble.
That's why they got worked up emotionally over it, and guys like Frank Mahavlich were actually quite frightened about the bugging of their rooms.
You get awakened in the middle of the night, you're in the middle of the Cold War. I don't think it's paranoia. I think it's a totally normal reaction. This was a totalitarian state.
I fully understood that we were watched. I mean, you saw the people in there. It was a little disconcerting.
Brezhnev was tightening the screws. A lot of dissidents were being persecuted, jailed. Very soon after that, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was exiled.
I don't really know who was behind that, but those things are not done by accident.
And this most likely was the KGB. They would want to create an advantage for the team.
The buses are different, the traffic patterns are different, locker rooms are different, and we don't want anything different. It was a series of all of these things. It can get to you if you're able to be gotten to.
You know, I've heard guys complaining that they stole our food and stole our beer and listening in on our hotel rooms. None of that ever even entered my mind. I didn't want to go look at Red Square, although I did. I was there just to play hockey and win. I felt, man, this is going to be Canadian hockey. Fuck the rest of them. We got nothing to lose. We can play and do whatever we want on the ice. And we did. It wasn't an issue when it happened.
Harlamov was considered to be the best player, the most talented forward, for sure.
In '72, I thought it was terrific. Thank God this guy's gone.
Harlamov turned one way, and I turned the other, and I seen him going this way, so I hunted him down. And I mean, I knew where I was swinging the stick when I swung it. I don't know if it broke his ankle. He tried to play after that and didn't, but it didn't hurt us anyway.
I heard the rumors after that, like that Harlamov injury was faked or something like that. But listen, he missed the first month. He missed the 10 games of the regular season, so it wasn't a fake. His ankle was broken.
Bobby Clarke was such an intense competitor, he would push his mother down the steps to win the hockey game.
The Soviet hockey fan will never forgive Bobby Clarke for his goon act on their great hockey star, Valery Harlamov. I don't think Clarke regrets it one bit.
The anger that I had, I don't know where that came from, and I only had it on the ice.
Good forechecker, good playmaker, and the intensity was unbelievable.
I'm sure it comes from a lot of things, from the town, from his parents, from his diabetes, from not being of superhuman dimensions. I mean, he had to find another way of being special.
I would say to you, the only guy on the team that would have done that would have been Clarke.
You couldn't play that way in the National Hockey League. They would have suspended you. Over there, it was just, they were doing the same things to us as we were doing to them, so you could do whatever you wanted. I happen to be one of those players that if you're gonna let me whack and hack, then I'm gonna whack and hack.
Canada must win tonight, and Thursday night's game to win the series. 2:50 left in the game, a 3-all tie. Henderson going down.
I went through the whole team with about 2.5 minutes left. Absolutely the best goal I ever scored in my life. 1-on-4.
To the defense, goes right on, going score! Henderson, right through the goal for Canada.
In those moments, after we had won the 7th game, I knew the consequences and what was at stake in Game 8.
You have been writing the script. It couldn't have produced a more dramatic and exciting final. Tonight we are making hockey history.
Obviously, Ken Dryden was a great goaltender, but if we'd have had a choice, we'd have said, oh, please, please, put Tony back in.
I do know in the warm-ups, everybody was shooting right at his pads, trying to give him some confidence and stuff.
I knew there was a very strong possibility that I would wake up the morning after the 8th game as the most hated person in Canada.
Lietkin over on the far side, a shot is stopped, a drive, they bang in and score! There's a dive, there'll be a penalty, there's going to be a penalty there. Maltsev takes his pass, there'll be a penalty there, one penalty after another.
When JP brings his stick back, however much you are in another world, that strikes you. I mean, it's, oh my God.
Parise is totally incensed at this call.
I was wishing Parise would have hit the sucker. Would have got rid of him. Isn't that a terrible thing to say?
And the game has almost reached a boiling point.
This is a time for Canadian hockey. This is a time for us to just let her go. And you saw lots of players who never showed the type of anger they showed in those last 3 games.
Look what people did. Phil said he would have killed somebody to win that series.
Even a guy like Paul Henderson had some violence in him in those last 3 games. And he was certainly not a violent man. It was really, really special, those last 3.
Soviets leading 5-3 with 3 minutes to Peter Mahovlich. Esposito bagged that. Here's another shot by Clarke. It's score! Now we see a fight break. Now there's a board.
When I actually looked up, Peter was actually over the boards.
The Canadian team are mixing it up with the spectators, and I believe Alan Eagleson is in on it over there as far as we can tell.
The poor guards, they didn't know whether to shoot him or what to do.
These were things that don't happen in NHL games. And at the same time, you're still sort of slapping yourself in the face and saying, you got a game to play.
Both teams have given everything, and it's been one of the best games I think I've ever seen. 5-all tie, 1:48 left in the game. Clarke has it on that wing. Here's a shot. Henderson made a wild stab for it and fell. Here's another shot. Right by the score. Henderson! And the fans of the team are going wild. An absolute mob scene over Paul Henderson as there should be. Canada have won the series.
In order to win this series, you had to find more than you knew was in you.
This crowd is going wild.
We were Canadians. Hockey united us. The only thing that might unite us as much would be a war.
They were able to win 3 out of 4 on Moscow ice
I'd heard that Yakushev, when he heard Canadian players describe the series as a war, that he said that he found that laughable. The Soviet Union lost about 25 million people in World War II. I would imagine that close to every player on that team would have lost a grandfather or a great uncle or in some cases a father. So for us, it's kind of a figure of speech. For them, it's a reality.
When the Summit Series ended, we went to Czechoslovakia for a couple games, and the Czechs are good. Like, the Czechs are almost as good as the Russians. We'd obviously partied pretty good after the 8-game series, so here we are. Nobody really wants to play these games now. So out we go, and now we're in this battle. And I didn't remember the player's name. I remember the incident. We were jabbing away and jabbing away. I finally had enough, and I just went, boom. Cut him. And then I honestly, at that time, felt bad, because I know it normally didn't, but I didn't want to be in another war and another battle on the ice at that stage. I just wanted to go home. That was a crude thing I did, and it was wrong.
Well, you get into a series like this, and you surprise yourself. Sometimes you stun yourself. Sometimes you hate the self that you see.
In the Soviet Union, after the series, there was a lot of tougher and rougher plays. It really affected the boys at the young age. I don't know why we picked that up, because there were some other great features of the series, but this was the favorite one.
The NHL started to change just after the '72 series.
We played the game hard. We played the game with the same group of guys pulling on the same rope at the same time for the same reason. And we won the Stanley Cup. You could never apologize for doing that.
He was the captain of the team, and he went out there, and guys knew it, that he would do anything to win the game.
I admired a lot about the Flyers. I admired Bernie Perron. I admired Bobby Clarke. And I admired Fred Shero, and I admired that he understood the situation that he was in and found an answer for it.
But I would suggest to you that the Philadelphia Flyers ruined the game of hockey. All the clutching, the grabbing, the fighting.
What people don't realize is that Fred Shero went over to Russia after the 1972 series because he'd seen the Russians, and he said, my God, there's a lot we can learn from these guys. And so he brought some of this hockey culture and this hockey system to his Philadelphia Flyers.
But at the same time, they won by making others worse. They won, through intimidation. That's why the '76 Stanley Cup meant the most to me. We played the Flyers and we beat them.
Serge Savard talks about that all the time. He said they ruined the game, and we had to take it back.
Well, people are critical of the Broad Street bullies and that Montreal brought hockey back to what hockey is supposed to be. They always took the high road. They didn't play that way. Well, of course, they didn't have to. They had an all-star team for a hockey team, so they could play any way they wanted. They didn't have to play that way. We had to play that way to win, and we did.
We're all doing what it takes. That's what we do as players. We do what it takes. And what do? We do what is in us to do.
The series pole vaulted my career much quicker than had I just plowed along through the NHL. I think this really helped escalate my stature.
Everybody knew Clarke would do it, and he did. And that's what made him a great hockey player. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame today, and deservedly so. One of the best center icemen that ever played the game.
As much as we love to say that, that hockey builds character, or sports builds character, to a great extent, sports reveals character.
All I did was try and win. Nothing complicated about it, in my mind.